Most women spend their lives trying to be nice, pleasant, acceptable. A gentle presence in a world full of sharp edges. But some women have a different energy. They don't beg to be understood. They don't shrink from being loved. They disappear, not to hide, but to become legend. And that, Carl Jung would say, is the beginning of the dark feminine, the archetype that lingers in men's subconscious long after she's gone. He can't stop thinking about you. Not because you're perfect, not because you've given him everything, but because you hold back something deeper, something sacred. You didn't give him your whole soul. You gave him a mirror. And in that mirror, he doesn't see you. He sees only his own shadow. You see, in Jungian terms, the anima, the feminine image in the male psyche, is more than an illusion. She is a psychic force, an inner guide, and a tormentor of men who do not know themselves. The more emotionally immature a man is, the more violently he projects this instinct onto real women. He does not love you. He loves the story his subconscious tells him about you. And when a woman embodies the dark feminine, she shatters that illusion. She becomes too real, too elusive, too whole. It is not your beauty that haunts him. It is your depth, your silence, your refusal to play the game of acceptance and availability. You have not tried to hold him back, and because of that, he cannot let you go. The dark feminine does not pursue. She doesn't beg for love in the language of wounds. She's not the girl who hopes he'll change. She's the woman who walked away when her soul felt invisible. And men, especially ego-driven ones, don't forget the women who choose themselves instead of being chosen. He replays the moments, her silence when he expected a reaction, her cold eyes when he wanted drama, her calm retreat instead of a desperate reach. These things unsettle him because they remind him that he's never been in control. And to a man who lives for conquest, nothing is more unsettling than a woman who doesn't need to be conquered. This is where obsession is born. Not from love, but from incompleteness. From the rough edges of a man's broken ego, trying to understand why your absence is greater than your presence. You weren't trying to soothe his ego. You shattered it. That's why he thinks of you when he's alone. That's why your name tastes like irony on his tongue, because he didn't know he was missing you until you were gone. And you? You never tried to be an enigma. You simply stopped acting. You withdrew your false light and let the darkness guide you. You let your wounds become wisdom. And that's what makes you sexy. Because in a world where women are trained to explain themselves, you become dangerous when you're incomprehensible. Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it destiny. That's what you arouse in him. Not love, but awakening. The kind of love that burns, the kind that shatters comfort and exposes the emptiness of conquest. You become a woman he cannot label, cannot box, cannot save. You make him question the mask he wears, the mask that looks confident but reeks of fear. And now, in every woman who gives him too much, he silently searches for the one who gives him whatever he doesn't deserve. But the dark woman doesn't wait for men to catch up. She walks her own inner path, through the layers of her own psyche, guided by intuition and silence. She doesn't seduce, she provokes. She doesn't control, she reveals. Her power lies not in what she does to a man, but in what she awakens in him that he can no longer contain. So when he thinks of you, and he will think of you, it won't be because he misses your laugh or the curve of your mouth. It's because you've triggered something he didn't know he had buried. You're not his fantasy. You're his mirror. And there are mirrors that don't reflect images. They show the absence of a soul that no one else has recognized. That's why he can't stop thinking of you.
He tells himself you were complicated, too intense, too cold.
But those are words men often use to veil the truth, that they encountered something vast within you they could not name, something ancient, something sacred. You didn't break him, you unmasked him, and the mask was all he had. What Jung understood, and what modern psychology echoes, is that the psyche is not built on light alone. The ego craves control, validation, adoration, but the soul? The soul is forged in contrast, in mystery, in the hidden dance between longing and denial, between touch and withdrawal. And it is in that dance, the one you did not choreograph but embodied effortlessly, that you became unforgettable. You were not a wound, you were the invitation to look at the wound. The dark feminine does not ask a man to love her, she dares him to face himself. And most men run from that challenge. They cling to women who stay in their light, who overshare, who fear being misunderstood. But you made no such offering. You see, the moment a woman begins to value her own mystery, she becomes mythic. She belongs not to any man's desire, but to the realm of the psyche where archetypes live, where the seductress meets the healer, where the muse hides behind the shadow of the mother, where Lilith walks unrepentant and unbound. And so you dwell in his unconscious not as a former lover, but as an event, something that happened to him, something he cannot undo, unsee, unfeel. Because you didn't give him closure, you gave him consequence. And now he senses it, in his quiet moments, in the stillness between women who try too hard and women who want too much. He senses you, the one who didn't need anything, the one who saw him but did not yield. And there's a voice, barely audible beneath his bravado, that whispers, "She saw the real me and left anyway." The dark feminine does not destroy men. She reveals what is unworthy in them. She makes love sacred by refusing to make it small. And her power lies not in possession, but in presence. Not in giving all of herself, but in giving only what reflects truth. This is why men who chase superficial validation can't hold her. She doesn't mirror their fantasy, she reflects their lack. To understand why he can't stop thinking about you is to understand projection. Carl Jung taught that when we are unconscious of our inner world, we cast it onto others. He projected his need for feminine wholeness onto you. But what he got instead was a glimpse of your wholeness, and that terrified him, because it meant he could no longer pretend that love is something to earn. He had to see that love, real love, meets you in your depth, not your display. You didn't perform, you didn't explain, you didn't soften to soothe his anxiety. And in doing so, you activated the masculine wound, the fear of being unworthy in the eyes of something truly sacred. You didn't punish him, you didn't beg him. You simply became a void where his ego once fed. And in that void, he saw himself not as a conqueror, but as a boy lost in the maze of his unclaimed manhood. It is no accident that the feminine in mythologies, from Persephone to Inanna to Kali, is often depicted as both beautiful and fearsome. The woman who blesses and the woman who leaves, the woman who nurtures and the woman who withholds. This paradox is not cruelty, it is initiation. You were not a stop on his journey, you were the lesson. And so long after others have loved him, long after names fade into the blur of comfort and routine, you remain, not because of the things you said, but because of the things you didn't. Not because of how you made him feel, but because of what you made him face. He can sleep with 10 women. He can build an empire. But until he does the inner work,
He will feel your absence like a shadow at noon, stark, sudden, and impossible to ignore. You didn't take anything from him. You left him with himself. And for the man who has not faced his shadow, that is the most haunting thing of all.
He may try to replace you with brightness, with noise, with women who are eager to please, but none of it quiets the echo you left. Because what he misses isn't your body. It's the feeling of being undone. The rare and terrifying intimacy of being seen, not through admiration, but through stillness. Through your refusal to participate in the script he's rehearsed with so many others. The dark feminine doesn't interrupt a man's life, it disrupts it. She doesn't demand, she reflects. She doesn't argue, she reveals. She becomes a psychic rupture in the narrative of his ego, and if he's unready, he will mislabel her as dangerous, unstable, too much. But that is not a statement about her. That is a confession about him. You were not too much. You were just enough to shake him out of his illusions, and he didn't know how to hold that kind of storm. Jung wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And most men, when touched by the dark feminine, recoil, because her energy is not compliant, it is not safe, it does not flatter or beg. It summons. It awakens the hero and the coward inside him and leaves him to choose. Your withdrawal was not passive. It was an initiation. It spoke the unspoken. I will not make myself small for your comfort. You were not punishing him. You were preserving yourself. And in doing so, you became the embodiment of what Jung called individuation, the sacred journey back to the self, even if it costs you the connection. He may not have the words for it. He may not understand anima theory or the alchemical union of opposites, but he feels it. He feels the lack of something real in every performance since you. Because the woman who lives her truth without seeking to be chosen shifts the gravity in a man's world. She doesn't orbit, she pulls, not with effort, but with essence. And yet your power lies not in making him want you, it lies in not needing him too. You see, the modern woman is praised for being independent, but rarely is she taught how to be sovereign. Sovereignty is not detachment from love, it is detachment from approval, from performance, from the need to be validated through possession. You became sovereign, and in doing so, you became scarce, not because you were unavailable, but because you were unalterable. You knew your worth not in terms of being desired, but in being aligned with your own energy. That is the very thing that haunts him, that you existed not as a reflection of his worth, but as a woman unto herself, a woman he could not label, could not predict, could not tame. And now his psyche aches, because every new pursuit lacks the archetype of weight you carried, the texture of your silence, the spiritual pressure of your boundaries. You didn't need to raise your voice. Your absence roared. This is the paradox of feminine power. True feminine energy does not strive, it allows. It does not chase, it magnetizes. It does not dominate, it disarms. And the man who is not at war with himself feels peace in her presence. But the man ruled by ego, he feels exposed. He may return, he may try again, but unless he has descended into his own unconscious, unless he has met the parts of himself he projected onto you, he will not find you in another body.
he will only find more reflections of his avoidance. Because you were never the fantasy. You were the invitation out of the fantasy. He thinks of you now in strange moments, in the pause before sleep, in the silence after an argument, in the stillness of women who give too easily. And in that stillness he remembers the way you looked at him, not to judge, not to seduce, but to witness. And when a man is witnessed, truly witnessed, he cannot return to sleep. He either begins the work, or he keeps chasing the illusion of you in every woman who is not you.
There is a moment, often unspoken, when a man realizes the difference between being adored and being altered. Most women offer the first. Few ever dared to become the second. You became the latter. Not through manipulation, not through charm, but by standing in your own mystery, untouched by his need to define you. He wanted access, but not depth, attention, but not presence. He sought the echo of control, but you gave him something far more dangerous, the mirror of himself. And this is the core of what Jung saw in the anima, that the feminine, when fully embodied, is not simply soft. She is transformative. She is both beauty and judgment, seduction and silence, ecstasy and terror. She is the flame that draws him in and the burn that reminds him of his own hollowness. You were not the lesson. You were the portal to it. And in refusing to shrink, you initiated him into something primal, something most men spend their lives trying to avoid: inner confrontation. The moment you said nothing, when he expected pleading, longing, need, was the moment you rewrote the script entirely. He was no longer the one in power. You were, because you had the one thing he did not: emotional freedom. And so you linger in his mind, not as the one who failed to love him, but as the one who refused to betray herself to make him feel secure. That kind of woman doesn't fade. She becomes a symbol, a psychological wound that pulses beneath every shallow encounter. He may laugh, he may thrive, he may touch other bodies, but yours was never about the body. It was about penetration of the soul, and he wasn't ready to be seen that way. So now he tries to forget. He surrounds himself with volume, more noise, more novelty, more narrative. But the psyche doesn't forget what awakens it. And you, in your absence, have become everywhere. Not physically, psychologically. You are the absence that follows him like a perfume memory, elusive, intoxicating, impossible to recapture. Because you did not beg. You did not twist yourself into something sweeter, something smaller, something more understandable. You remained a riddle. And men do not forget riddles. They return to them in their solitude, hoping this time the answer will come. But you are not a question to be solved. You are the evidence that not all women are waiting, that not all love is soft, that some love arrives not to hold, but to unfold, to dissolve the mask, to bring the man to his knees, not in surrender to you, but in surrender to himself. You made it clear, without ever saying it, I will not bleed for you to feel full. And that statement
whether spoken or merely lived, becomes a thunderclap in the ears of any man who has used love as anesthesia. He cannot unhear it. He cannot unfeel it, because in that moment he saw something holy. A woman who walked away, not in bitterness, but in power. And yet, let this be clear, your detachment was not indifference. It was sacred rebellion. It was choosing the path of the soul over the comfort of egoic love. You wanted depth, not devotion. Transformation, not transaction. And when he could not meet you there, you let the silence speak for you. That silence is louder than any confrontation. It says, I love myself more than your potential. And in a world where women are trained to doubt, to fix, to explain, your silence became thunder, a storm without rain, a reckoning he still can't name. Jung would call this the call of the self, the deeper knowing that emerges only when the ego is humbled. You became the messenger, not through force, but through presence, through embodying the energy that says, I do not chase, because I am whole. He remembers you now, not in flashes of intimacy, but in voids, in the places where meaning should live but doesn't, in the conversations that end too soon, in the eyes of women who seek approval, not presence. He remembers you in their laughter, the kind that bends too quickly, that masks a fear of being too much. You were too much and not enough for him. Too much truth, not enough pretense. Too much presence, not enough performance. Too much soul, not enough story.
There is a kind of grief that doesn't scream. It hums beneath the skin, invisible to others, deafening to the one who bears it. That is what he carries now, a silent, private mourning for the version of himself he might have become if only he had met you fully. If only he had been ready to stay present in your fire rather than retreat into the familiar cold of ego. But he wasn't, and that's not your burden to carry. Your existence was never meant to be a rehabilitation center for men unready to meet their own shadow. You are not the bomb, you are the burn, and that, precisely, is why he can't stop thinking about you. You see, the mind may forget, but the soul keeps score. It remembers what jolted it awake. It remembers the woman who did not offer her body as currency, who did not place her heart on the altar of his half-interest, who did not bend the spine of her spirit for the illusion of closeness. You were not a transaction. You were an initiation. The feminine in her dark form doesn't seek to be held. She seeks to transform. She is chaos and clarity woven into one. And for the man who clings to the illusion of control, she becomes the storm he cannot predict, the tide he cannot tame. And still, she is not cruel. She is sacred. This is what most men misunderstand. The dark feminine is not rage. She is revelation. She arrives to dismantle the old, to tear down the temples of ego and fear. She does not destroy the man, she destroys the boy within him who still needs to be mothered, worshipped, saved. She calls forth the king, but only if he dares to leave the throne of illusion behind. That's why he dreams of you now. Not because you made him feel good, but because you made him feel real. Your energy didn't coddle, it confronted. Your love didn't flatter, it exposed. And in a world where masks are currency, you were the one thing he couldn't buy, a woman who refused to be anything but true. And what is truth if not the mirror in which a man meets himself naked, without charm, without role, without script? You didn't fall for his stories. You saw the boy behind the armor. You saw the longing behind the pride. And still, you chose you. And in that choosing, you became unforgettable. Because no one forgets the person who showed them what they almost had, and what they lost because they were not ready to become who they needed to be, your energy required. That's what gnaws at him. That's what lingers in the quiet. The ache is not for you, it's for who he could have been with you. And so you walk on, not bitter, not closed, but wiser, more whole. Because the woman who has tasted her own fire does not settle for warmth. She does not collapse into longing. She does not barter her mystery for momentary affection. She becomes the keeper of her own soul. And when she walks with the knowledge that any man she welcomes must first belong to himself. That is the power of the dark feminine. She no longer asks, "Will he love me?" She asks, "Is he whole enough to meet me where I am?" And if the answer is no, she does not grieve. She lets him go to meet himself. That is the part he will never understand, that she did not leave him. She released him. She let him walk away so he could discover, in his own time, whether he was built to hold something sacred or merely seduced by what he could not possess. And when he finally realizes what he lost, not a woman, but a mirror, a calling, a holy disruption, it will be too late, because she will not be where he left her. She will be somewhere deeper, somewhere freer, somewhere beyond reach. The woman who has become whole does not circle back. She does not explain. She does not reopen old wounds for men still addicted to bandages. She walks on, unchained, unseen by the old version of him, radiant in her silence. And in that silence, she becomes myth.
He may search for you in the eyes of others, hoping to catch a flicker of the storm that once held him captive. He may chase laughter that sounds familiar or bodies that remind him of the one that once stood still while he fell apart. But it will all feel thin now, lighter than it should, emptier than he can admit. Because once a man has touched a woman in her dark feminine, once he has tasted the presence of a soul that will not yield, the world becomes less vivid without her. And still, she does not return. Because she has become sovereign, not in rebellion, but in remembrance of herself, of her worth, of the sacred silence that lives in the bones of a woman who no longer seeks to be chosen, only to choose. This is where your story no longer intertwines with his. This is the moment of individuation, not just for him, but for you. The moment you rise not as the woman he couldn't keep, but as the woman who remembered her power wasn't in being kept, it was in being free. You no longer live in the energy of being remembered. You live in the present. You live in your breath, in your body, in the sacred rituals of self-devotion. You dance not for eyes to watch, but because your spirit must move. You speak not to be understood, but because your truth will not remain silent. You walk not to be followed, but because the path ahead belongs only to you. And this, in the deepest sense, is the awakening, the final detachment, not just from him, but from the need to be needed. You shed the last remnants of proving, of performing, of waiting for recognition. You no longer carry the burden of being unforgettable. That is his burden now. Because the woman who walks through her own shadow and emerges on the other side does not return to the cave. She becomes the fire others gather around, not to be warmed, but to witness what is possible. You are no longer a reflection. You are the source. No longer a symbol in someone else's story. You are the storyteller, the script writer, the myth maker, the one who knows that her value does not rise or fall with who stays, who returns, who regrets. And this is why he can't stop thinking about you. Not because you belong to his story, but because he no longer belongs in yours. You were the mirror. Now you are the flame. You were the test. Now you are the temple. You were the haunting. Now you are the healing. Not for him, but for yourself. So when he remembers you, in the ache of midnight, in the scent of a passing stranger, in the dream that wakes him gasping, he will not know what to do with it, because there is no door back, no key, no second chance with the woman who no longer waits to be claimed. You have claimed yourself. You have stepped into your life not as an offering, but as an oracle. You don't ask, who will love you now? You ask, what more of myself have I yet to become? The dark feminine is not a phase. It is a becoming, a shedding, a sacred evolution into a woman who no longer seeks safety in someone else's hands because she has found sanctuary within her own bones. So if he thinks of you now, let him. You are no longer bound by his longing. You are free.